Nico, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show here and talk product marketing. How are you?
Hi, and thank you so much for having me as a guest, Jorge. I'm fantastic. I was looking forward to talking with you.
Awesome. Yeah, as we were talking about in the kind of like the pre-room here, green room, I just see you all over LinkedIn talking product marketing and really kind of engaging. Why don't you tell folks a little bit about your, career background and how did you get into product marketing?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting. So, first of all, I got into product marketing, I think, like many other people in this space, which is it was a happening, I guess. And the background is as follows. So my experience is quite eclectic in the sense that my experience spans over events, growth marketing, demand generation, PR, you name it. And there was always this element of promoting the product or promoting whatever it was the company that was building, right? The company that I was working for was building. And then a few years ago, I actually heard the term product marketing, and it was, like the skies open and the angels started singing and the stars aligned. It was, yes, this is what I've been looking for. This is the field that brings together all these very different experiences that I've gathered under my belt and that I can actually use to help companies tell their story, help companies show the value of the product, and help the prospects and the future customers understand why that specific product is benefic to them.
Mhm. And so, I think you sort of answered it a bit there, but what would you say from your perspective, just given that, product marketing seems to be a vast array of things, right? And we always bring this up because I love to get people's perspective on what product marketing is from their view. What would you say if you had to explain what product marketing is your definition?
I wouldn't say it's a definition because it's very hard to really, really pinpoint what product marketing is because it covers such a because it's such a big umbrella for so many things. Um, Most of the people will say it's a process, but I like to think of it as the intersection between art and science in telling the story of how the customer can ease their specific pains and solve their jobs to be done thanks to the product's value. So always keep the customer at the forefront. And I was saying that in my opinion, I see it as an umbrella term because I think it's about bringing a product to market, but it doesn't stop there because then you need to do experiments and help it grow. Or as the famous book says, to make it stick, to help make it stick, right? And the only way you can do that is through, continuous optimizations, talking with the customer, understanding more of their pains, see if your initial hypotheses were right, and continue to work on that. And I guess besides this, so besides the research part, is also the positioning and the messaging, explaining the product value and position it as a solution to their specific pains. And also, let's not forget about enabling the GTM teams, right? The sales, CSMs, and even partners. I guess with a deep understanding of the customer's jobs to be done, it then explains the product value and positions it as a solution to their specific pains. And as a consequence, you not only create demand, but you also increase the existing demand and the revenue. So I would say it's both tactical and it's both a tactical and a strategic role, depending on the level of maturity of the company, depending on the focus, and obviously depending on the resources, right? Because it's one thing when you're a small company with maybe a single PMM and just 10 people in total, and it's a whole different thing when you're already an enterprise level and you have even people defined by function within product marketing or per product. So it depends a lot.
What would you say are some of the traits that define or make up a top product marketer? You mentioned like the research piece, right? And so, some things that come to mind to me are like, well, being able to like run effective, let's say, focus groups, right? To be able to actually derive that research you talked about, and that's a skill of its own. From your perspective, what do top product marketers have?
Um, I will not necessarily dive into the hard skills because that's very, very easy to find. Just Google it and you will see, competitive intelligence, research positioning, etc. But I think the skills that a PMM needs varies a lot, again, based on their maturity level, because a junior PMM needs some skills and then a VP of PMM needs other skills. And I think they are split somehow into more process focused and then people focused. And from these angles, I'm going to approach your question. So I would say one is problem solving. As a PMM, you need to be able to find solutions to problems that you had no idea would arise, and in an unexpected way. So you really need to think on your feet. Then you need to be both analytical, right? To understand the data, the patterns, to understand the research that you're doing and what exactly the insights are from there, but also translate it into something creative. What's the creative output of that data? Time management, I would say, especially for solo PMMs, and there are so many out there, and my heart goes to them because it's so difficult when everybody pulls you in different directions. Strategic thinking for sure, and bias towards action. And I would also say collaboration, because it's really at the intersection of many different roles and teams, but also leadership and influence, because you need to coordinate the efforts of other colleagues, other individuals, teams, or even the whole organization. And then the other part, I would say, critical thinking. So observing, questioning things, analyzing, interpreting, and have your own opinion, have your own voice, and explain why you think the company should go in a certain direction, but have something very concrete to show for. And also curiosity. So I would say curiosity is the driving force in a PMM role, because it drives you to learn about the situation, about the customer, about the company, about the product, about the market, the business, the colleagues. It helps you with all of these different things.
Awesome. If you were to think about how product marketing can better align with sales, we hear this all the time, right? Like, one of the components you mentioned was supporting sales and enabling them, and there seems to be, at least from the research we've been doing here at Asimil, always this like contentious relationship that comes up for a variety of reasons. And I think this is just a topic. It doesn't even have to be like super contentious. It's just like alignment in general between sales and marketing has been a thing for as long as I've been doing, business, right, within technology and within this space, which is now like 20 some years. What would you say from your perspective are some ways that product marketers could better align with sales?
This is a very good question. And I am very curious to hear your thoughts on this as well. But allow me to answer your question. So I think, like in any other relationship, like in personal relationships, it's all about one, communication, and two, transparency, and three, empathy, being able to put yourself in their shoes. So just today, I was having a conversation about this with another great PMM, and he said something that I really resonated with. He mentioned that at the end of the day, sales are interested in reaching their numbers, right? And if you can help them do that, perfect, you're on board. If you create friction in them doing that, if you need them for other things which they think, just takes their focus away from sales, then you're going to have a harder time. But when I said communication, I think it's about explaining to them why a specific action or content or asset or whatever it is that you're doing and you need their involvement with is important, and how it will ultimately come back to them to help them in their activity. And the other thing is to have a very clear discussion as to what comes under product marketing and what is it exactly that product marketing can help them with, like a charter or something similar, just to make sure that they have it very clear exactly who to reach out to and for what. If there's a team and then you have someone for competitive intelligence, someone else for sales enablement, they need to know those go-to persons and how the collaboration can go. And the other thing, I think it also starts from bottom up. I think from bottom down. Sorry, I think from the
The top,
higher.
yeah, yeah,
Yes,
from
from
leadership
the
all the way down.
from
Totally
top
agree.
down. Exactly. I'm so sorry. So what I'm thinking is that if the CRO and the CMO, they are on the same page, and if they are together, then that will roll down within their teams as well, because each of them will try to enable and will always remind their teams to always come together and share information amongst them.
Absolutely. You asked what my opinion was, and it's interesting because part of what we've been trying to do here at Acid Mule is build a tool that will help better align sales and marketing, particularly product marketing or those folks creating sales collateral to enable sales. And, one thing that I just keep running into time and time again is no set of software is going to solve that completely. Like it might help, right? For obvious reasons, but like it's the humans that need to be able to come together, talk about what they need to do to support each other, talk about what are the challenges that might come up, right? Those sort of things, and be ready to face those together as a team, as a unit. And I think you mentioned the top down leadership having to set the stage and set the expectations and the culture, right, of the team. I think that's so important, right? Yes, sales, and I've been in sales most of my career, and it's definitely something where sales is just basically incentivized to enforced for obvious reasons to hit their number. But what if you were to create models where collaboration and other things supporting, let's say, PMMs with introductions to customers, or these things that are not related directly to hitting their numbers but indirectly they are, right? I mean, you look at when people run ads, let's say just ads in general. One that comes to mind a lot is like these billboard ads, right? Where you run ads out of home on like highways and things of that nature. Attribution is not a perfect science. We all know that, but this is very, this is generally hard to kind of track. There's some ways to do it, but we always know, right? Like, when you run those out of homes, you'll see the impact. It's sort of like hard to attribute, but you'll see the impact. So there are these things that indirectly impacts sales and you hitting your number as a salesperson, but that's not directly like obvious, right? I remember, boy, 7 years ago or so, we would do. I was running a startup, and we would do these things where we would go partner with a conference or an event and say, "Hey, we'll go and shoot and make video for you if you let us set up like a little table at your conference," right? And like clockwork, Nico, like clockwork, um, after those events, we saw an uptick in leads, right? And all we were doing was shooting video, interviewing people on site, collecting content, and we would see it. And it was impossible for us to like directly, accurately attribute that to an event, but we just knew when we did those things, right? So I think that it's a shift. There has to be a shift in in really like in the culture of the team to say, you know what, I am a team member. Yes, I'm in sales, right? But I am a team member of this much larger go to market or revenue organization or just organization in general. And part of my job is not just to hit my numbers, but to also collaborate and make other teams easier or be easier to work with other teams, right? So I think those things come to me and are top of mind when talking about better alignment.
And this also makes me think about one more thing, which is to have joint KPIs to be tracked based on the same kind of metrics. Because right now, usually marketing is just responsible for the amount of leads, and then sales is responsible for how many they convert. But there should be some joint metrics, because then if both marketing and sales are responsible, so both and I'm not just talking here about obviously product marketing, but also demand generation. And generally speaking, I think this would help have a better alignment in the quality of leads that are being brought in, but also in the process, how the process is happens, and to make sure that there's clear criteria in place in terms of what do we consider as being a lead that is within our ICP and that makes sense for us to spend time with and nurture and dedicate our efforts to.
Absolutely, those parameters. If you were to think about challenges, right? Alignment being one, and maybe that is the top challenge. But what would you say from your experience, if you had to single out one challenge that PMMs have to kind of overcome, what would you say is sort of top of mind for you?
It's very easy. It's prioritization. I hear this from so many colleagues in the field, and especially solo PMMs, but not only, even in larger teams, because there's just so much to be done, and there are so many activities and so many projects that can have impact. And sometimes it's also the thing that product marketing managers find it difficult to say no. And also because they are very enthusiastic people usually, and they do want to help get things done, and they do want to make an impact. But yeah, I say this leads to this issue, to where do I start? What should I do first? There are all these teams coming to me with all these great ideas. What should I do first? And I think this is one of the biggest challenges that PMMs have.
Yeah, I mean, when you described what product marketing is, you talked about so many different things, collateral, right? I mean, right there alone, you could just have a full-time job, right? Just creating
Yes.
collateral to support sales. But you talked about positioning and messaging. You talked about research, so that makes a lot of sense to me. From
There,
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
there, sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing, that I think the other face of the coin is that this also happens because there is a lack of the resources that they might need, right? So I think if PMMs would have more budget to invest in tools, or if there would be more team members, probably the situation would be a bit more different. But nowadays, due to budget constraints, especially considering the economy that we are in, I think we see this more and more, that the lack of tools and the lack of resources is one thing that causes this as well. And if PMMs would have access to their own budget, if PMMs would have access to specific tools, which there are so many out there, it would make their life much easier.
What would you say, speaking of tools, is the product marketing tech stack?
I would say my favorite word, it depends, because you need to figure out first what's the biggest issue, or the one that comes up most often, right? If it's about, say, competitive intelligence, you have tools like Clue, like Crayon, Compite, Competitors App, you name it. There are lots of them. If you have a huge number of releases, then maybe a tool like Ignition might help. If you think about win-loss, then something like Double Check, or Closed, again, might be helpful. And then if you think about content producing, there's Jasper, or other tools are there. And let's not forget also sales enablement, right? Which is where tools such as Asset Mule come in to help with this.
Well, thank you for the plug. We're trying.
And there are also other tools that you can use as a PMM if you don't have the budget to get this, or if you don't have the access to this. You can, depending on what you want to achieve, right? You can, for instance, use Google Ads Transparency Center if you're doing some competitive intelligence research, or SEMrush, or Ahrefs, or Octopost, where you can see your competitor streams. You can use Hotjar if you want to see how well your landing page or the information there resonates. Or also if you just launched a product and you want to see, okay, are people scrolling? Say if they scrolled 90%, they are pretty much interested. If they only scroll 25%, I think it's safe to assume they weren't that interested, and then you need to figure out why. You can use Google Tag Manager for different events that happen on the page. You can use Loom, right, to pre-record videos and share that online or with colleagues. And obviously all kind of collaborative tools like Miro or Mural, or also for ideation. And CRM, let's not forget about the CRM. Hopefully, if the data is filled in accurately, which most of the time doesn't happen.
Yeah, big human component again, right? Like we talked about earlier, it's the human component. The technology is getting better. Of course, AI is helping, I think, with a lot of different things, but still that human component. All right, Nico. So I know we're coming up on time here, but if you had to provide one actionable tip that you would give PMMs around really making their role more efficient, and something they can really implement today here, what would that tip be?
I would say everybody talks about AI these days. But if you're in Europe, that makes it a little bit more difficult due to data privacy constraints, right? And if I were to give one advice, I would say transcend the AI hype and think a little bit further. Focus on the elements that you can use and fructify not only in your PMM role, but also in your life. So I would say in a time of slow economy, a time where the focus is on efficiency, ROI, and more than that, cost saving, I guess frameworks and mental models can help solve the pains that I mentioned earlier, right? Lack of resources, prioritization. And when it comes to prioritization, there are many, many frameworks out there. There's, the matrix between urgency and impact. There's also ICE, impact, confidence, ease of implementation, Pareto principle, 20% of your time produces 80% of the results. But there are other mental models that might be useful as well. So, for instance, inversion, that's a mental model. And basically, what you do here is that you prepare for the worst case scenario and avoid them. So rather thinking about the desired outcomes, consider the outcome you would like to avoid. So instead of what are the top 5 things I could do to promote my product, ask yourself what are the top 5 or 10 things that would negatively affect its adoption, and make sure you steer away from there. And then you also have, say, redundancy or margin of safety. And this basically helps you use backups and contingency plans in case of failures, right? Yeah, so I would say being aware as a product marketing manager or as a product marketeer of these frameworks, mental models, and biases, also you want to avoid those. Is key in telling the story and bringing it all together in a data-driven way, but also having that storytelling characteristic to it, because you don't want it to be very dry. You want
Dry.
to put some meat on it as well, and take the customer, take the prospect on a journey and show them why. But you really need to prioritize what's the impact versus the urgency.
Awesome. Nico, thank you so much for being on the show today and just, bestowing your wisdom. If folks wanted to connect with you on social media, maybe follow you, what are the best channels or URLs to reach you?
I'm always happy to connect, and the easiest way to do so is through LinkedIn. That's where I usually share my stories and ideas. And yeah, I keep in touch with a lot of wonderful people such as yourself. So thank you so much for having me as your guest today, and for having this conversation, and yeah, asking for my opinion on these different topics.
Awesome. Well, have a wonderful day and thanks again.
Thank you too. Have a lovely day ahead.